and global capability centers have been the topic of many a conversation. I think COVID was the tipping point when we saw this industry really open up very, very significantly. And it's been a very exciting space to be part of. Many of you have been instrumental in shaping where the future is taking us and where the GCCs are really headed. It's been an industry that's been around for over 2 decades, but one that has also evolved very significantly along the way. And technology has played a very, very key role in shaping this. Today, GCCs are represented by sectors, all sectors, pretty much every sector from the BFSI and consumer retail to energy, to life sciences, to industrial auto manufacturing. Every industry has adopted the model. We've had GCCs that have been around for over 2 decades, and then there are others that are still coming in and setting up shop. We've actually seen very varied scope across the model, some that have used it for very specific niche processes and functions, others that are truly multifunctional. So the models vary, the sectors vary, the shape and size of the GCCs vary. And hence, it's really a hard one to compare one versus the other. What we are going to do is I am going to put up a little frame of reference that we're going to use for this conversation. We're going to be in discussion with Dr. Sumit Mitra, who heads the Tesco GBS model, the Global Business Services model, and he will talk a little more about the center as we go through this. And of course, we also have Sangeeta Kumar, who heads the BNP Paribas GCC. You're going to see some very diverse views emerge. We have BFSI on one hand, we have consumer retail on another. I do like to believe the one common thing they both share is they touch every part of the consumer life cycle. So truly consumer oriented in that sense. Without further ado, I'm going to just spend a quick minute to share my screen, and please tell me when you can see it, if you can, because I'd like to put up this frame of reference. I hope it's visible to you all. It is? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So very quickly, and this is just to call out a few dimensions that we believe influence the maturity and how GCC models have evolved. And I'm going to quickly go around without spending too much time. The first one is strategic alignment to the global organization. So how are you looking? What's the purpose of why you're establishing the capability center? How is it meant to be aligned to global agenda? So on and so forth. The second one is governance and empowerment. How integrated are you as an organization across global geographic borders? And how empowered are you? Do you really see a seamless balancing of global roles between what we term onshore and what's sitting out of India today? How is that working, and how empowered is the GCC today? Service portfolio. So what is the extent? Is it an end-to-end scope? Are you truly looking at end-to-end functional accountability? What's the level of penetration? What percentage of global headcount sits out of here? How do you measure and look at service portfolio? Depth of capability. Whether you're a multifunctional GCC or a single function, what's the deep capabilities you're building? COEs have certainly been the flavor of the year. What kind of deep capability, true centers of excellence have you established? Digital maturity. So whether it is how you've embraced technology across the GCC, or have you really built deep capabilities on the digital side across emerging technologies? Where are you on digital maturity? Future-ready workforce. How agile have you been in really embracing what the talent landscape has thrown at us? Whether it's interesting new models, whether it's future skill requirements, whether it is creating very flexible and agile structures that are required for the future. Risk and compliance, a critical theme, one where we've all proven ourselves through COVID, and that's a big reason why GCCs have emerged so successful as a model. But how ready are you for the future? Are you truly agile? The next risk that comes our way, how equipped are we to deal with it? Last, not the least, an industry that started on the premise of cost and value. Are you really on the top of your game there, just in terms of how you're measuring cost, continuously improving, and actually unlocking value in the truest sense? So these are a few dimensions which we're going to use as a frame of reference for our conversation today as we get into a quick dialogue with Sumit and Sangeeta. So with that, I'm going to open up and I'm going to pick the first two, and no reason, it's just that I think they're very useful two dimensions when you look at strategic alignment to the global organization and you look at governance and empowerment. And I'd love to open this up to get both Sumit and Sangeeta's views on how critical do you see this has been in terms of shaping the purpose of the GCC and the design, the operating model, and the future. Sumit, you want to answer that first?
Thanks, Shalini. Real pleasure to be here today, especially to talk about GBS, which is my favorite subject. Look, let me start off with saying 30 seconds on Tesco. Tesco is the largest food retailer in Europe. So we have been one of the pioneers in terms of setting up GCC capability in India. We started off in 2004, and we have evolved into a business solutions model in the last 5 years. And India is one of the centers that delivers capability back into the group, apart from Budapest, Waterford in Ireland, and Dundee up in Scotland. Now, in terms of the breadth of services that we deliver, it starts from architectural design. When you think about architecture of stores in Tesco, 100% of architectural design, to data science and digital transformation, it kind of sits within Tesco Business Solutions. Now, in terms of the two most important aspects of the model, which I would like to talk about, is one is the strategic alignment. So a lot of people talk about seat on the table. So what's really important is your GBS, is your GCC, do they have a seat on the table? And once you have a seat on the table, it's really important that do you have the ability to influence the conversations that's happening around the table so that you become a big strategic influencer for the group. And the second one, it's no longer about labor arbitrage or cost savings. That's gone, that's given. As a business, if you're not delivering cost savings, you are not really a proper GCC. That's a given, that's your bread and butter. But what's important now is, are you becoming that intelligent business solutions model, which really delivers, unlocks untapped value opportunity? So here at Tesco, we look at number of dimensions. To me, there are three things. One, are you increasing the revenue of the business? Second, are you improving working capital and cash? And the third one is, are you improving margin? And we have a number of initiatives, whether it's through data science and analytics, whether it's through unlocking opportunity through our FP&A capability, or are you helping the business to make the right decisions? To me, those two are the kind of absolutely critical. And to me, they're interlinked, because unless you have a seat on the table, you're unable to influence. And you influence through your GCC model.
Thank you, Sumit. Well said. In fact, seat and voice at the top table from what I hear you call out, and some great dimensions, all of it speaking to the top agenda for the global Tesco organization. Thank you for that. Sangeeta, your quick take on these critical dimensions.
Sure, and great to be here. Thank you, Shalini, and great to connect with all of you. Very much part of BNP Paribas, leading the GCC here. Of course, it's from the BFSI space, and this is amongst the most mature sort of capability in the GCC space, right? Banking and financial institutions have been the base of how the GCCs got built as an industry. But to the point that you were referencing, and Sumit very well called out, I think the key really is the strategic alignment and really having that seat on the table, or voice on the table, as we are calling it. I think, and this has moved quite a bit from where we started as an industry. If I look back to the yesteryears, the GCC teams were trying to create their own image, have something that they could wow the stakeholders with. So we were looking at a lot of other things around creating our own capacity models, maybe looking at how we look at risk and excellence, operational excellence in a different way. And no longer those needs are there, right? That wooing and wowing is sort of over. I think from an industry capability perspective, and specifically if I reference BFSI, we've really matured on that industry curve, if I look at it. And that has brought the need for that strategic alignment, because if the true value of the GCC has to be mined by the enterprise, then that strategic alignment has to be there, and it has to be very carefully crafted given the nuances that exist, and especially in a large setup like ours with different businesses, technology, operations. There is a wide variety of stakeholders that need to be they need to agree to that strategic sort of positioning of the GCC, and what is now being called this integrated, really model of delivery, right? And making the GCC sort of borderless in that setup, I would say, is very critical to really us getting the real value. In the BFSI space, there are a lot of fast changing environment, especially from a regulator perspective, and Sumit will say even from the customer perspective, right? We have so much of change and ask which is coming in. Till the GCC is able to align to that and co-create that with the enterprise, we are not really going to be able to really deliver the best. So I think that in its entirety needs to be positioned well. And when I look at the BFSI space, I think we are all getting there in that journey. I wouldn't say at BNPP we are there, but it is a journey which is positioning us in that space, really, I would say.
Thank you, Sangeeta. In fact, just a small follow-on to that, and to either of you who may want to respond, as you look at the empowerment part of it, and you spoke of the seamless borders, Sangeeta, Sumit, you touched upon that voice at the top table. It's also about one seeing more and more global roles actually being seamlessly distributed across both what you see onshore as well as here in India. Are you seeing that happen increasingly so? I'm just curious.
Yeah, Shalini, for the BFSI teams across the industry, that is happening quite seamlessly now. Barring a few roles which have some regulatory sort of positioning to it,
right.
and they can't be distributed like that because the regulator requires some of these to be in those locations. Beyond that, there is pretty much seamless sort of opportunity for global roles to be run out of the GCC, wherever it is. Like you said, it's no longer just about India. When you start looking at the GCC space, it's evolved quite a bit, and it just depends on where the bulk of the work is sitting, and the leaders from there should run it, because there's nobody else really manage it, right? So
absolutely,
that is happening, and that has empowered the organization really to move forward and influence.
Yeah, and we are seeing that happen clearly.
I was going to add 2 seconds to this,
Sumit,
Shalini,
please.
that's okay.
Yeah, please.
So I think a word of caution is that empowerment has to be earned.
Yeah,
it's not a right. So you need to make sure that you continue to do your brilliant basics.
Yeah,
and then continue to add value. And it becomes a seamless movement. It's not about just exporting talent from a GBS organization into the mothership, but it's also vice versa. So why can't talent from the mothership will move into your GCCs? So I think it's a two-way street. But what it's really important is you have to earn the right.
Absolutely, and couldn't agree more. And that's what's gotten us to here. So we need to sustain that. As I ask you another couple of questions, I'm going to just put up this model again just for reference, because my next question to both Sumit and Sangeeta is going to be, when you look at these dimensions, and of course, each of you will have your take on it. But what, in your view, if you look at the industry at large, where do you believe which dimensions score highest on maturity today? And again, I repeat for the audience listening in, this is hard to compare one to another. So it's just an individual view at this point. But which parameters do you believe we've really evolved and are at a higher level of maturity compared to others? And whoever wants to go first.
Shalini, if I'll take a stab at that, really for me, the talent, right? The future ready workforce, as you're sort of encompassing that into.
Yeah,
I think there is still a scarcity of niche skills. There is that talent demand, and GCCs have been able to help in sort of creating that capability and at sort of in depth, right? It's not about just few people, but being able to produce that at a in larger numbers from a talent point of view. I think the digital world and the creation of COEs around that has really put the pressure on these talent pools. And the ability of GCCs to transform and reskill people to enable the enterprise strategic objectives has been possible because of talent pools. So I would say I would still rate that, although it seems to have been the genesis of GCCs as well, but I would still continue to put that as an important element of continuing to on the maturity curve as well.
Actually, thank you. That's wonderful to hear, because that's also where the future is resting or leaning on, that talent being sustained and that advantage being sustained. Thank you. Sumit, your take on this?
Yeah, for me, the most important piece is the strategic alignment. To me, unless you are, as I said to you, you aren't a part of the strategic pillar of the organization, you can get lost in the system. So it's really important to have that seat, as I talked about earlier on.
Yeah.
And what that drives the investment, drives the value creation, drives the co-ownership and co-piloting the business. I think that's really critical for me. The rest, for me, these are real brilliant basics that we need to have as a business. And from a strategic alignment perspective, what's also key is understanding the purpose of the business, the values of the business, and how do you create a GBS organization and a GCC in India to ensure that you connect it to the purpose of the business, and that drives the alignment that we are all looking for. So I think that's why we have been nominated as #1 GBS in the world. So feel really privileged and honored with that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for that. In fact, I'm going to ask the flip side of that question to say, when you look at GCCs, and again, my question would be maybe at an industry level, to say, if you had to look at a couple of dimensions where we still have ground to cover in terms of maturing, so where the level of maturity is lower than the rest, which would those be? Are there any that strike out to you as, really areas that we still as an industry have to evolve?
Yeah, let me have a go at this first.
Sure.
So one of the things I would talk about is there is an obsession around digital maturity.
Yeah.
Now, for me, it's not a rat race. There is no reward for being first and using the best shiny tools that's available on the planet. For me, what's about is understanding your business. And we run a retail business with a 4% profitability, which means that we need to be very careful in terms of how we spend our money. And if a digital maturity is the bullet train that we are all after, I think we need to build the foundation. The foundation is the tracks that the train is going to run on. And the two tracks are the culture of the organization. How do you build the right culture that's ready to drive change? Because you can only drive change at a pace that organization can consume. And the second element is that of the process, making sure the processes are ready, streamlined, you drive a continuous improvement culture before you lay a technology foundation on top. And sometimes technology is not the answer. So to me, it's not a rat race, but focus on the process, the culture, the value that you're creating for the business, rather than running after a digital maturity score.
Well said. Well said, Sumit. We've seen waves of technology come and we've seen these spikes of excitement, but I think building the foundation and the two tracks you spoke of, culture and process, are really at the fundamental of helping and enabling the digital maturity. So well said. And I do believe, yes, we have some way to go on digital maturity. I agree with that, as well as with future ready, perhaps the workforce being our strength. So I think some great inputs. And when you look at this model across perhaps some of the newer centers, and like I said upfront, the level of maturity would vary sector to sector, tenure of the GCC, how long have you been around and in existence, your purpose of setup. Are you a digitally native GCC versus someone who's been around for 20 years? Lots of different factors at play, including leadership, sponsorship, and vision for the center. So there's no one answer, but these are just pointers for us to kind of mull over. As we look at, hence, the road ahead, I'm going to stop sharing this so I can see you all better. but would like to talk a little about, what do you see as enablers for really taking the model to yet another level? What are those critical enablers that are going to help us really take the maturity model to another level? In fact, some of these parameters may even change entirely.
So Shalini, yes, to the point, I think Sumit was referencing as well. I think we've talked about the criticality of the strategic alignment, right? For the GCCs to really feel, to really be able to sort of, go up the value chain or co-create value with our businesses. But I think another significant element of having created this capability of depth and breadth, and now a full domain sort of understanding which rests within the GCC organizations. Here is a big opportunity for these enterprises to become sandboxes, right? The labs of the broader organization. So you are beginning to see that element where we can go ahead in the game to try and maybe look at newer products, newer services, maybe test out another model, begin to think of a solution-based approach for our clients versus just products. So I think these are elements which GCCs have sort of started to step in and create some sort of sandboxes, like I said, around that. So I think that will be the opportunity here for us to start viewing the capabilities built to transform into the next level of maturity. In fact, now what you're also seeing evolving around us is no longer saying how much percentage of a team is sitting here. Those are not important, the final numbers, etc. It is about what critical roles are here. You'll see a lot of newer GCCs who don't have to necessarily go through this entire cycle and maybe short circuit the cycle to, jumping into being more mature. I've heard my peers say, now it's only about those critical roles that we are positioning within the GCCs. We don't care where the base sort of work goes, right? That can go anywhere. But what we want to drive is the strategic agenda from the GCC. And that's where the maturity has to sort of transform, get away from the number game a little in our heads.
Yeah, I think we're clearly getting there, Sangeeta. In fact, you've kind of answered one of the questions. I'm keeping an eye on it, which spoke of difference between digital maturity and digital twins, because the digital twin is really more the innovation sandbox you're talking about, where organizations are creating that digital twin of the global organization out of here. So in some sense, those who've done it clearly would also rank high on the digital maturity curve, because if you've actually replicated your organization digitally out of the GCC, then you're already up at a certain level of maturity. But I agree with you on the innovation, the value, and how you're actually going to experiment and build more out of here. In fact, build more with less, actually. Sumit, your response on some of these enablers as you see it.
I think one of the biggest is data, because for me, data is the new oil. And we need to make sure that we have the ability to trap data, to maintain accuracy of the data, harness data, and then use deep science and analytics to drive business outcomes.
Yeah.
To me, it's no longer about producing report or producing insights. It's about helping business take decisions. So here at Tesco, what we do is we build tools of the future, which is the data science and analytics tools, which looks at our should cost model, our high value customers, our debt cockpits, and these help business to take decisions, and which delivers then multi-million pound revenue margin and cash upsides. So to me, if we don't move into that data maturity, data deep science and analytics, we'll be struggling to deliver the next generation value. I think data science and analytics is key for the future.
Super, absolutely. In fact, as we've seen, in fact, through COVID and more recently, the number of tech centers and tech hubs that have been set up here have really gone up multifold, where global organizations see the advantage of having your tech nerve center here, which absolutely includes the underlying data structures and how that gets managed and what it can enable and how it unlocks value. In fact, I think you just also answered another question there, Sumit, but if you want to add, because it spoke, one of the questions from the audience is, how can we drive margin and working capital from GCCs? You just briefly alluded to that right now. Do you want to add anything more as you respond to that question?
Sure. Biggest example I will give from a Tesco perspective, I start with cash. Now, from a GBS perspective, we manage around 75% of Tesco's entire finance. So if we are not able to improve cash, I don't know who will. So for me, it's working with the product team to understand the supply chain, to understand how we pay our suppliers, understanding the rules behind each of the suppliers, and building a tool that monitors your cash performance across each of the process streams. That delivers the working capital improvement. I mean, I've if we spend years building this, so I'm not doing justice in 30 seconds.
I know.
Cash is king in retail. And the second piece is around margin. I mean, to me, we run property, we run product, we run supply chain, we run finance, we run our customer insight. So that gives us an opportunity to really understand what is the customer telling us. What are we doing from a customer journey perspective? And to me, it's no longer a or conversation. Do we reduce our operating cost or cost to serve to our customers, or do we improve customer experience? To me, it's an and conversation. So by reducing the handoffs, by really understanding the customer insight, you're actually influencing customers' shopping decision to shop more and increase the basket size. So that's drives margin. So we get audited by the audit committee, we get audited by our internal auditors to actually understand how much value we are creating through margin and cash upsides.
Super, and clearly that's speaking right to the top table actually in terms of what they want to drive. I'm going to get to a couple of questions because I know we just have 2 or 3 minutes. An interesting one here, and maybe Sangeeta, you could try and answer it. It speaks of while strategic alignment with HQ is key, at a tactical operational level, time zone differences could be a challenge. To have SMEs, process experts being part of GCC and still participating in business process discussions in different time zones. Else it gets limited only to developers and data entry operators operating out of the GCC. I think we moved away from that, but a quick response to that question, how important is time zone for you to really make impact beyond developers and data entry?
No, actually, it's no longer a challenge, right?
Yeah.
I think everybody is accommodative to our global clock, and so are our global stakeholders and our SMEs here. So I don't see that as a challenge at all.
Okay, thank you. That was absolutely to the point.
I can just cut 2 seconds if I was going to add.
Sumit, please.
That's why you build global hubs.
Correct.
To ensure that you follow the sun.
And very true, because India, and in fact, there's a related question to say which other country would be country of choice for a parent company to be apart from India. One of the drivers is the time zone differences, language differences, and there are a few others, but any that come to mind that you may want to name as we look at other countries?
To me, it's about proximity to customers.
Yeah.
It's about data, where you can see the data, touch the data, because there's GDPR compliance, etc. in Europe. And third thing is, in terms of regulatory issues, what can be taken out of a particular area or not. So, and everything else, and India is a land of talent, the sheer volume of graduates which is coming out, it's always the default location for any others. So you got to manage those exceptions and really understand your business better.
You're spot on, Sumit. I was going to say regulations also drive, and of course, language skills in some spaces as well, right? Given the customer interaction.
Yeah. Firstly, again, my apologies. I know this has been crunched. We could have done this over a half-day session, actually, given the content and how much there is to talk about, but I'm conscious of time. I am going to take one more question because it's kind of linked. There's a question around our favorite topic on the hybrid working model and talent. I'm going to combine that because there's no getting away from talent, which is core to this industry. But the question is, what's the most interesting talent challenge for India GCCs? And just keen to get your thoughts on that.
So I would say from a talent perspective, I think the key thing is about continuing to engage the talent of today and tomorrow, really. I don't see hybrid or any of these as the key challenges. but it is what will keep us going. And some of the maturity of the GCCs and their ability to pick on, can I say, more value, more exciting work is what's going to enable us to do that. And that's what we are after.
Okay, thank you. Sumit, your views.
Yeah, for me, it's a possibility mindset. Sort of, if you look at any reports in the next 5 years with AI for operations, with digital transformation, the skills that we leverage now will disappear. I mean, almost 5-6 million roles will disappear globally. So how do we ensure that we continue to upskill ourselves and upskill our talents to ensure they can deal with the future that's in front of them? I think that would be the biggest challenge.
Super. Thank you so much. I'm very conscious of time. I think we've begun to lose a few people, but I see a lot of appreciation, and there's a lot of comments on half an hour not being enough. I've had to get both Sumit and Sangeeta talk in super speed mode to cover their points. We clearly could have done a half-day session on this, but thank you yet again. To leave the audience, you've heard from two very mature centers. You've heard where the industry is headed. And this maturity framework is only a frame of reference for each one to look at where the future lies, what's going to influence that, and what can you use as a baseline to measure evolution and progress. So we will send out a few more insights. There may be questions here that we'd be happy to answer offline. Thank you so much for dialing in today. Appreciate your making the time for this. Thank you so much, Sumit and Sangeeta, for being here in conversation on this subject. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, nasscom.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.